The way Captain Kirk was written was really terrific. You know, all the things that you would never play anywhere else, I got to play in Star Trek. I saw death and I saw life. It was a wonderful role. I often wonder where I was many of my formative years. If you can get with the universe by being aware, is my thought, the universe takes care of you. There are so many instances of the universe taking care of me. I don't remember any edict. I'm going to be an actor. I'll go there and I'll do this. Things just happened. I started as an actor when I was 6. It was a camp play, and I was there like for 2 weeks. Kids go up from the city for 2 weeks in the country, and then their parents come up and get them. And when their parents come up and get them, they put on a play, which is what I did. I was saying something very evocative, and it made the audience cry. I looked out, and I remember the feeling, wow, I had no idea of the power. And then my father picked me up, and my boy Bill, and I thought, oh, my father loves me, and I made people cry. That's good. I don't know how to characterize my family. Lower middle class. You know, my father made enough money so that I could buy a bike, or he could buy a bike for me, but nothing much more. Things were tough, and so I didn't expect much more. I do remember saying, if I could make $100 a week, I think I'd be very happy. So I remember that figure. And I became a teenager and did teenage radio at the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, CBC. And then there was a summer theater. Summer theater led to professional winter theater, which led to Stratford, which led to Broadway. I just accidentally moved from one thing to another. And now I needed a roof over my head. I was married, and I had all the currents of happiness and unhappiness that young people have. You know, I was overwhelmed by, I had been a free soul up until then, and now I was like, I got a kid, and I got to pay the rent. I'm married, and I've got to do something. I remember thinking that, I've got to work. And that kept me up. I've got to make money. Norman Corwin, who was one of the great American playwrights that not many people know about because he wrote primarily for radio, and he won innumerable Peabody Awards, which was the big award for broadcasting. So Norman Corwin wrote a play for me, not a radio play, but a play for New York. And a few months earlier, I had done this pilot called Star Trek, and it had been a pilot, and then they recast it. They asked me to come to Los Angeles to see the pilot. I saw the pilot. Oh, that's really good. We want you to be the captain. And it's right up my alley. I'm hitting people, I'm rolling, and I'm tossing, and let's make it a little bit lighter, not take ourselves so seriously. So Corwin writes a play, wants me in it. We rehearsed the play. We opened the play in Salt Lake City. It was a great play. So now we're going to go to we're going to open New York. And the phone rings. And I guess it was Gene. He said, series sold, and we need you on whatever date. But I'm supposed to open on Broadway. Well, sorry. So I didn't open on Broadway, and I thought, oh, God, I got to do this series. Or as I look back, I think, God, you know, the play didn't work, and the series moderately successful for 3 seasons and then stopped. It was in the 40s in popularity. I was gainfully employed for 3 years, and that was good. Should I have done that? And now looking back, of course. It was the only thing I could do, should do, did do. So Gene Roddenberry was a very tall, imposing figure. He'd been a pilot, and he'd been a policeman, situational awareness, and got to take control of a place. My first impression was there was this imposing man who had written the script, and it was a good script. I'd read a lot of science fiction prior to that. I knew some of the names that were popular in science fiction at the time, and the script was good science fiction, and I was impressed. Science fiction opens up a vista into what mankind really could do. Because the more we look through our telescopes and the more we realize what's out there, we don't know what's out there. We just know that our minds are incapable of imagining the infinite space that's out there. Arch Oboler wrote a movie where some entity in space places a dome over our Earth and examines it like it's a piece of scientific curiosity. And that's what we are like. We're a scientific curiosity on the verge of being extinct, and yet we write these incredibly imaginative, evocative things called science fiction where we imagine what it would be like to have a world where human beings overcome their turgid reptilian brain and realize that not only do we have to get along together, but we have to get along with everything that is entangled. And that's a favorite word of mine. Everything is entangled. We are intricately involved with each other and with the world. So imagine that dome over us and this entity in space saying, what are these things? They're self-destructive and they're beautiful. They're angels and they're devils. What are they? We're angels because we've imagined the beauty of a world that could exist if we only used our frontal lobes. There are some names who were the forces behind Star Trek. Obviously, Gene Roddenberry. Gene Coon was a force for Star Trek that not many people know about. Bob Justman. They were the functionaries of the Star Trek that I did. And Gene Coon was been a Marine colonel, I think, yeah? He was an officer in the Marine Corps and had that Marine Corps thing. Get it done, let's do it. And it was very military. And I thought very Star Trek. So we followed a military protocol in the stories. There was this series of books called Horatio Hornblower, which was a young captain of a sailing ship sailing around on his 5-year mission. And so Star Trek owes a debt to Horatio Hornblower. And it seemed to me, because I read the books, there would be a camaraderie that didn't have a pomposity to it. We're all taking care of each other. I was asked about what would Gene Roddenberry think about present-day Star Trek. Well, I haven't only seen excerpts of some, but the things that go on in Star Trek, I said would make Gene roll in his grave because he was very much a stickler. He was also difficult, both in the series and making movies. They had to pay him off so he'd stay out of the way in the movies that were made. So what you have is a wonderfully creative guy who made it difficult for people to be creative around him, is my understanding. So Nick Meyer was a huge force in the recreation of Star Trek. The result of that film, The Wrath of Khan, and its popularity was the rebirth of Star Trek, from whence that came all the others and all these thousands of people who have been working gainfully all these years. Nick Meyer is a wonderful talent. I directed one of the Star Trek films, and I thought, what an opportunity. And I was given the joy of, what do I want the film to be about? The one-line idea that I would love to explore is Star Trek goes in search of God. And I thought, wow, that's powerful. And they thought, oh, that's good. And then somebody said, and it might have been Gene Roddenberry, well, whose God is it? You know, if you do it the Catholic God, you alienate 3/4 of the world, and if you do it to the Jewish God, you alienate a lot more than 3/4. You know, so there were arguments to whose God it was. It wasn't a nebulous, nefarious God. It was God. You know, does he sit on the throne? Why don't you ask? Well, I don't know. If he sits on the throne, it's what is that? A Protestant God. I mean, it's rife with questions that I thought would be interesting to answer. They wouldn't let me do God. So then somebody said, and I don't know who that somebody was, what if it's a being that thinks he's God? Okay, let's go that way. Because I was trying to preserve the idea, and I compromised my idea. And the big thing I learned on Star Trek V for me was, where do you compromise and where do you stand on principle? Where do you say, no, that's not going to work. I want it this way. I didn't know the power that the director is supposed to have and that I didn't exert. And so it was taken away from me. And I didn't realize it then. I'm blundering on. Oh, this is a good scene. There's a good angle. I now know I would make a different film now, being, if you'll excuse me, more mature. I was inundated with work. You know, you're on a set 12 hours a day. You leave, you're tired, you come back the weekend, you're doing publicity or you're doing something with the family. I must have been less myself. I must have been harried. I was getting a divorce, playing a lead in a series, and felt responsible. I had a lot of stuff going on. Now that I'm older, I would probably do several things differently. But DeForest was a lovely man, and I didn't get to know him better. A lovely Southern gentleman. If there was any squabbling going on the set, he wanted to make peace, and I regret that I didn't get to know him better. I visited him when he was the Actors Hospital. We spent a lovely time together, and he said to me, "Why don't you visit Carolyn? She's here too," his wife of, I don't know, 50, 60 years. So I went to visit her in the ladies' area. And there she was. And we're talking, laughing, and I said, "I know so little about you. Where were you born?" And she burst into tears. She said, "Don't ask me that, because I can't remember." Oh, God, what have I done? And that's a possible fate for anybody. And that was the last I saw of both of them. Leonard, I didn't know who he was, and knowing more later, he'd worked diligently, studied. He had come to acting in a more academic way than I did. As I now know, Leonard had his own problems, and I didn't know about them. He was struggling with an addiction, and he says that he was playing the role of Spock, even off screen. So we talked. He was an admirable guy, such intelligence, such discipline, that I admired him and really liked him. But it was only afterwards that we would see each other for great lengths of time, in cars that would bring us to sets, and cars that would take us to Comic-Con. And we'd be on stage together and make each other roar with laughter. We became brothers. Many a meal we had where we talk, because life and death and divorce and children and hardship and great things that happened. We were brothers, and I loved him. And a few months before he died, I don't know, something happened, and I don't know what it is. And I've been assured by both of his children that he loved me, but he stopped talking to me, and I couldn't break through. And towards the end, I was told he was dying. I wrote him a letter saying how much I loved him and how I regret not seeing him. And he died. And I don't know to this day. I'm told stories by people who said to me, "You know, that happened to me." And it was because of the illness, and their minds, they weren't thinking exactly the same way. So I'd like to think that was it, that as he got further and further along with his emphysema, that it wasn't something I did, because I loved him. So Leonard dies. He had to be buried within 24 hours in Jewish religion. At the same time, I had obligated myself to go to a Red Cross fundraiser. They had raised millions of dollars, and I was one of the celebrities there. So they had gone there. They had put their money to buy a table based on my being there. And what I said to them is this: there's no such thing as legacy. The only thing that lives on are good deeds. If you do something nice, whether it's helping an old lady across the street or building a school, that's the reverberation. That's what your legacy is. Nobody knows, but it reverberates and stays to the end of time. A statue, a building, a Battle of Actium, they're gone in no time at all. Nobody remembers. Do we remember the Second World War and the lessons of the Second World War? We're at war again. Does anybody remember these things? Nothing. It's criminal that nobody remembers the history. Nobody's interested in history. It's telling the story of humanity and the repercussions. I've been intrigued by space a long time. I've talked to so many scientists about what's out there. I'm as intrigued, maybe even more so, than a lot of people. Blue Origin now had a space program. So we go up to Seattle, and we enter this giant lobby. In the lobby, spotlighted, is this glass dome thing. Go over to it. It's the real model of the Enterprise. Wow. There's Jeff Bezos. But Jeff Bezos turns out to be a great fan of Star Trek. He has to be a very bright man. He figured out Amazon. That wasn't an accident. So he was a fan of Star Trek. Every so often I make an observation in my own life, like this journey into space. I was looking behind me, and I could see the blue air and the wake that the spaceship left. Never heard that talked about. It's like a submarine going through the water. And then I turned and I saw blackness. And I thought, my God, There is an extraordinary quality of romance about space. We're going to go out, land on Mars. We're going to for searching the stars. Our little Voyager is out there now sending back a signal. I didn't see any of that. When the Webb telescope expanded its solar panels, almost instantly it was struck by a meteorite. I don't know of any more that hit it, but how delicate is space travel? So I know the romance of space, and I saw death. When I looked back, I saw blue, beige, and white, and I saw life. Now, I've read Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, and it affected me a lot. I knew what was happening years and years ago. I didn't realize it at the time, but when I got off the spaceship on the ground, I found myself crying, and I didn't know why I was crying. And I realized I was in grief. What was I grieving? The death of the world. I know firsthand the extinction of species. Millions of things already have disappeared that we didn't know existed, that took 13.8 billion years to evolve. Life! We don't even know what life is. And it's gone. How sad is that? Doesn't it make you weep? Chesapeake Bay in 20 years went from poison, you can't eat anything, to hey, let's farm Chesapeake Bay again. In 20 years, it renewed itself without us. So that's what's going to happen. We're going to die, mankind, and the earth will continue and refurbish itself and something else will grow. Unless, and I don't know what that unless is. That unless is science fiction. So Rick Berman is in charge of doing the last film that the character of Kirk was going to appear in, called Generations. We knew that Kirk was going to die. I'd like to think we die the way we live. So Captain Kirk, I imagined that he would die with awe and wonder, like, wow, I'm dying. I wonder what's going to happen now, with courage and bravery. And he's not afraid. So my thought was Kirk would die. Wow. So they wrote, it was fun. And lying there, I thought, it's better than that. And I tried to see whatever it was, the cloud, the guy with the scythe, and say, oh my, is the way I wanted to say it. Didn't quite come out that way, and I didn't know it until I saw it. It comes out a little, oh my, it comes out a little fearful. I didn't want it to be fearful. What is the human soul? What is conscience? What is life? What is life? I'm feeling those emotions that I presume you're seeing. I did the best I could. I don't know whether I would do anything different now looking at it. I really was immersed in Star Trek. Its ideas, I loved it. So I die, I get up, and I say to Berman, got a book where I suggest how to bring him back. He said, no, we're going to go with the next generation cast because the films that your cast makes hit a glass ceiling of people who would come and see the series. None of the movies make $100 million. We're going to go with the next cast and make a lot of money. Well, you know, I would love to be part of a film that brought the character back to do something, but I'm 65 years older. I think I was 26, 27 when I came in. How do you account for that? The age, and am I still recognizable? How would you do that? I mean, science fiction's filled with magic. You could do it because we live in science fiction. Science fiction offers an imaginative look at what could happen. I think it's beautiful.